welcome back to the next section of our Viking AI series. I've done a few things off screen here that you should know how to do. Let me just go over them really quick. First of all, what I did is I just went to that magic ball in hand and I just put a point light in there. I put a fire emitter and then changed the colors to blue on it. Put a point light in it. Notice that with the point light, if you have the draw halo on there, then what you can do is get kind of a solid core in there if you want to play with it. The exact rules of this I don't really care about. You can kind of put whatever you want, just something so that it's not just that red ball probably. What I did is I just made sure that all of those objects were a child of the magic ball in hand, and then I went into the mesh render and turned that off. So I still have that ball, and it's still got a collider on it, a sphere collider on it, which isn't important for this though, but all of that becomes a child of it. Now what I am also going to do is I'm just going to take this group, I'm going to copy it, Control C, or come up here to copy here. And then I want to make sure that that's inside of my prefab as well. So I'm going to come to my magic ball projectile, come here, and I'm going to go ahead and paste all that content in there. Make sure that it's at 0, 0, 0 in relationship to the other ball here. That should be probably okay. I'm going to make sure and take this projectile here, turn off its mesh renderer. Let me go back, and I just want to make sure that I see what the scale is on those. Yeah, so it's this kind of strange scale. If I look at this though, we should be able to see, yeah, all that stuff is still there. I just want to make sure that this projectile version matches the version that's actually set there in his hand. All right, so that's use your creativity. Go ahead and fool around with that. Notice that I have an actual light source in there. The idea is that I want to make sure that as he's walking around with this magic ball, that actual light actually lights up the area around him. The other thing that I've done is on the forums you'll find a package called Viking UI. Viking UI has 3 elements in it. It's got a shield, a power bar indicator, and the power bar. All I've done here is just made a simple UI set of images where what I've got is the health bar is set. Here, let's look at it up here so that we can see it a little bit larger. I've just set these 3 things up. The health bar is the one that's furthest back. I've got the shield that I went in and added a little bit of a color. You can play with that. And then I've got 5 indicators that are all set there. The important thing about all of these is that it's important to note that I went in here, held down Shift and Alt and centered at the bottom center because that's where I wanted them to be, and then move them all from there. What that means is that no matter what size my my screen is, then that's always at the bottom center. Last is I went into the canvas and made sure that I changed this from constant pixel size to scale with screen size, and then use 1920 by 1080 as its default, so that that's all set up. So this gives us some visual fun things with that ball, and it gives us a UI system here. What we're going to do in this tutorial is we're going to build in the UI system so that this actually tells us when we're dead. So let's start to create some other material, some other scripts to do this. I'm going to quickly create a very simple C# script for the player health, and this player health will be fairly simple and something that you should be able to write in your sleep by now. What I want it to do is let's create an integer called health, and then I'm going to create a public method called doDamage that in the past we've always passed a value, but the idea here is that every time it hits us it's going to do the same amount of damage, so I don't need to build this as a variable. But what it'll do is it'll say your health is going to be equal to whatever health was minus, since we've got 5 indicators, minus 20. And then what we'll start to do here is I could either make this as a case switch. Yeah, let's do it as a case switch since we've built case switches in the past. So what I'm going to do is let's create a switch here that's going to check for whatever the value of health is. we'll have a check for the value of health, and then inside of here we'll define the cases. Remember that you always have to have a default case, or you don't have to, but you should, that will actually break out of the case switch when we need to. Okay, so every time we change the health, then what I want to do is say, hey, in case that we are health is equal to 80, then we're going to start to turn off the first indicator. And then we'll repeat this process for all the rest of these, breaking down each chunk as we go down by 20. Now what this means is that, of course, the script needs to know what those indicators are. So let's make sure we're going to be talking to the UI, so we're going to use Unity engine.ui so we can make sure and talk to those. Let's come in and we'll just make a public, here we'll just do it as an image, public image called health indicator 80, because that's what our, let's see, what did we call them? Let's just take a look at what we got here really quick. So 180, 40, 20. Okay, so we'll do health indicator 100. Let's come in and we'll do these others here. That'll be 80, 60, 40, 20. So we'll come in here, do 80, 60, 40, and 20. Okay, so that those will all be set here. So what we can start to do is we can start turning these down. So we start off with 100 for our health. If we, here, we'll just tell it to be 100 when it first starts. Well, let's not do it that way. I'd like you to get in the habit of actually doing this another way. So let's, on the start, when the game starts, we'll make health equal to 100. I'm not making it a public variable for now. I'm just going to make it a private one, and we'll define it here. Okay, so it starts at 100 when we lose 20. In the case that it's 80, all I want to do is take a health indicator 100, and I'm going to use enabled because it's actually a component, and we'll make that enabled equals to false. And then in each of these, we'll just start breaking that down one more. So we'll come in here and say, when our health is 60, then I need you to take the indicator that was 80 and turn it off. When the case is 40, then take 60 and turn it off. In the case that this is 20, then let's take indicator 40 and take it off. And then when this is 0, then what we want to do is say, let's have 20 turn off. And then what we would also do here is, let's just leave a note that we would launch the game over screen. And so you could build that method in. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this. So we've got the do damage here. Now we've got to work out the details of who actually talks to it. So as we come back here, let's start to plug some stuff in. I'm going to let this compile. This exception keeps popping up. I'm not sure what it is. Usually if you just clear that and it all goes away and we're okay. Okay, so let's come back to our first person character and start to tie some of this stuff up. So there's first person controller. I'm going to minimize some of these because I don't need those on there. But if I take my first person controller, let's take my player health and drop it on there. It needs to know what all of these guys are. So there's 100, there's 80, there's 60, there's 40, and there's 20. So all of those we can kind of flip off one after another. And then let's come into, since we're doing this in the wizard assets, I'm going to come in and let's do a magic, oops, let's do a, come on now, let's do a magic ball script. And then we'll go ahead and edit this magic ball script to make sure it's talking to that do damage. So when this opens inside of Visual Studio. Yes, go ahead, that's fine. Magic Ball script, let's make sure that's saved. Magic Ball script, let's make sure that these match. Okay, Magic Ball script, it's going to be important that this is just coming in and knows when it's hit the player. So let's come in and make sure that the player actually is tagged as something. By default, sometimes the player actually does have a tag, sometimes not. So let's look at the player, it's untagged. So let's come in and tag it as player. It's a built-in tag that's set there. What we'll do is let's build an on collision enter here. Collision enter. We'll say, look, if the collision, the thing you've collided with, .collider.gameObject.tag is equal to player, then we want to go ahead and do the work where we actually do the damage. So let's say that at that point we go to this object, the thing that we just hit. Let's get the component on that is called player health, and on that object, on that component, let's fire the function do damage. Okay, and that will take care of that. Otherwise, we can do some other things here. What would probably be better is if there was some sort of explosion when it hits something. But for now, let's just tell it to destroy itself once it hits some surface. So if it hits us, then it destroys. If it hits some building, then it destroys. Probably you'll want to instead do some sort of instantiate some cool effect here. Is how we'll build that. But at its core, what it means is when it hits something, it checks to see if the thing that it hit is tagged as player. If it does, it talks to that player's player health and fires the do damage. So back in Unity, we just need to tie all the stuff up together. Of course, this is on collision enter, so it needs to go on the actual projectile. So I'm going to look at the projectile here. Let's come down here, and I'm going to add that script to it so that it's set. There's a few other things we need to clean up before this is going to work quite right. Remember that the way that our script currently works is that it takes the magic ball in the hand, and all it does is it turns off the mesh renderer. But that doesn't turn off all of the objects that are children of it. So we need to adjust our script a little bit. So let's come back into the script, into the wizard AI script, find where it's throwing the ball, and here's the line right here where we're turning off that mesh renderer. Instead, what I'm going to do is take magic ball, let's go to the game object, and instead we'll use setActive. Now, the way that setActive works is that it turns off, in this case, not only the object, magic ball, but all of its children. So I'm going to copy that, come down to where we reload it, and do just the opposite. So that when we reload that, we hit true, then it goes ahead and turns it back on. The last thing we want to do is make sure and clean up this one issue that when I was building these tutorials I discovered on accident, and that is the magic ball script. We see that what it does is that as soon as it hits something with a collider, it destroys itself. The problem is outside in Unity we're having it instantiate the new ball right where this magic ball is. And so the problem is since this magic ball has a sphere collider, then as soon as it strikes that sphere collider, it destroys itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the sphere collider on the magic ball in hand. Now it's important that I still have it on the projectile, but that the projectile still has a sphere collider and a rigid body, but the magic ball in hand does not. Alright, so if we were to play the game, then once he starts patrolling, he runs up, starts to throw a ball at us, then that ball will hit us, and each time it hits us, it does damage as it kind of smacks us around. Now you can see that it's real easy to dodge this thing though. Let's build a little bit more interesting balance. All right, so let's make the balance here a little bit easier, a little bit better. That was too easy to avoid. It was too easy to dodge him because it takes too long for him to kind of wind up to make that setting. And the way that it works is that he pitches the ball in the direction of where he stops. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this magic ball in his hand, and I'm going to have that always looking at us, and then have it instantiate that from that point when it instantiates the thrown ball. So let's do this by creating, I'm just going to create a little script called, let's call Magic Ball Aimer script. Now this is just part of the idea of balancing your game, right? Making it so that it's if it's too easy and you can never get hit, it's not a very fun game. So let's come in and look at this. What I need to do is this always needs to know who the player is. So let's make a variable here, a game object called player. On start, let's make sure that this goes out and populates player with game object dot find and FPS controller, so that it's always looking at us. And then we're going to not do this on update. We want to do this on late update. There's a couple of different forms of update. Late update means that there's fixed update, late update, and regular update. They all determine at which time in the frame, in which order they actually fire. We want this to fire after the other calculations are made from the joints and things like that. So we'll do this as a late update. But here I'll just tell this object transform dot look at, and we're going to look at the player's transform dot position, so that every frame it's just looking at the player. Okay, so let's come back and put this on the ball. So let's put the ball aimer script right on the hand there. So we've got that set up. That should be fine. Oh, looks like we got an old script there. Let's remove that one so we don't have one. Now what I'm going to do is look at this. I'm going to hit play and then immediately hit escape because I want to hit Shift F to frame that. And so what you can see here is you can see that that ball, no matter which way he turns, you see the ball's positive Z. Remember, I'm using pivot and local. Its positive Z is always looking at the player. Now we can't see anything difference in here, but because we know that that's always looking at the player, then later we can use that to our advantage when we instantiate the new ball. So let's come back into our wizard script, and this area where we instantiate the ball, the magic ball at the ball launch point's position and rotation, the velocity, instead of giving it velocity in the direction of the creature, which it might not be facing us anymore, let's go ahead and give it velocity in the direction of the ball's launch point, because that's the thing that's pointed already at the character. Okay, and let's maybe turn this up a little bit. Maybe 10 is too short, is too slow. So if we come back over here, take a look when we compile, what this should do is, since that launch point is always looking at us, then at the moment that it instantiates and it gives it velocity, it will always be facing towards us. It'll be a little bit harder to dodge this thing. Although if it's too fast and there's no way to dodge it, it becomes kind of tough to win. But let's come in and see if this works a little bit better. All right. So see, even if we move, oh, that looks good. We can still dodge, it looks like, if we're real careful. But it's much better at hitting us. So even if he starts the wind up and we're way out of the way, then he'll still hit us more often. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I might even turn mine up to 40. I think that 30 still seemed, that 20 still seemed a little slow, but I can give this a test real quick to see how it works. What this should do is, at this point, we now have AI that not only will patrol, but the AI will chase us. So the AI will chase us around, and it will attack us when it's at the appropriate distance, and that attack is actually doing damage to our health. So all I've got to do now is there's got to be some sound in here, right? So when that ball is flying through the air, it probably needs some sound on it. When it hits me, we should probably have some sound. All those things can start to help that out. All we need to do now is we need to have some way for us to fight back, so that we're not just hunted by the wizards, but that we can fight back against them. And we'll do that in the next tutorial.